Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre looking for the best of fun escapist books. Today we're reviewing a book called A Christmas Carol Murder by Heather Redmond. So this book is the third in a series. I've not read the first two, but each of the ones in this series are based on Charles Dickens books. You've got Tale of Two Cities and Oliver Twist and Great Expectations, and this one is A Christmas Carol. So I picked this one because I'm most familiar with A Christmas Carol, and probably most people who are going to watch this have also experienced some version of the Christmas Carol story. My favorite, I think, is The Muppets. But either way, so since I had a background of what the Christmas Carol was, I figured it would be more relatable. And if I liked this, I'd be interested in trying the others. Okay, so the story on this, the idea is that we are following the main character of Charles Dickens. So he is the main character of the story. And he, along with a couple of real life characters, but mostly fictional characters, kind of live out and experience something that I would consider related to, or maybe even in a fictional way, inspiring the tale that this is based on. So there's a whole bunch of Easter eggs sprinkled in the book, but it is not following the story of A Christmas Carol. That's not what's happening here. So the plot is actually that Charles Dickens and several of his friends and relatives and his fiancée, whatever, go Christmas caroling. And when they go Christmas caroling from house to house, they happen to come across what we would consider Ebenezer Scrooge's house, although they give him a different name in this. He's Emmanuel Screws in this, because again, it's Easter egg hints of the characters, but they're not actually the characters in the story. Anyway, they go there, they Christmas carol, and a man falls out of a window and lands on the cement in front of their feet dead. And it is Jacob Marley, the partner in the original Christmas Carol story. He's already been dead. I think that's one of the first lines of the story, that Jacob Marley was dead as a doornail or something like that. And so this story, however, focuses on that death and says, has he been murdered? Did he accidentally fall out of a window? What happened? There's a lot of suspicious circumstances around this. Shortly after this man is dead, his body is stolen, and then there ends up being another murder later on. So it's clearly murder mystery kind of thing. It's a very cozy murder mystery. So you have Charles Dickens following along, kind of amateur detective, amateur sleuth idea, just curiosity, trying to figure out what's going on with the murder. And his fiancée, Kate, who is his real life wife, Kate somebody, is also extremely interested in murders, and they kind of do this together. And so you've got, that's the basic plot of this, without giving any spoilers about whodunit or anything like that. And then you see various characters that you're familiar with. There's Tiny Tim shows up, and Bob Cratchit shows up, things like that from the original story, and the chains of Jacob Marley and things like that. Okay, there are some ghosts, and we'll put that in quotes, because sometimes there are ghosts that are definitely not ghosts, and sometimes they're like dreams of a ghost or something like that. Okay, but it kind of again alludes to those Easter eggs throughout the story. Okay, so in this one, we have some things that I like, one of which would be the Easter eggs. I mean, I really did like the idea of investigating a canonical death of Jacob Marley. I mean, that's clever, I think, because if you're going to do a murder mystery, you already have a death in the original Christmas Carol story. So to set it based around that, I think is pretty clever and a good idea. And so I liked that. I liked a lot of the Easter egg stuff. I thought that was kind of cute. I tend to like books like that, like a novelization of a fairy tale, or seeing hints of things from something else. The Easter eggs, I just think it tends to make the reader just kind of chuckle and go, oh, I know something that the character doesn't, and I don't know, it's just a fun feeling. So I like that. I like our characters. Charles is generally a likable character, not perfect, not idealized, but generally likable. He's very generous and kind in this. So in this book, right at the beginning, basically somebody comes up and thrusts a baby at him and says, "Here, go take care of this baby, I'm sure it's yours." And he's kind of, honestly, he's like, this baby isn't mine, but he doesn't know what else to do with it, so he takes care of the baby. So that is a kind thing for him to choose to do. And especially in that time period, because this takes place in whatever it is, the early 1800s or something, and so it's a time frame that orphans were kind of sent off to really crummy workhouses type of orphanage type things where a lot of babies could have died. And so the fact that he's willing to take care of somebody else's baby was an exceptionally kind gesture. So I like him as a character. His fiance also comes across pretty well. So this baby causes some problems. So Dickens was given this baby and he knows it's not his, but would his fiance understand? And he does his best to kind of keep it quiet from her for a little bit in the book, which I don't necessarily approve of. I think he should have come right out and told her from the beginning, this is what happened, trust me, it's not my baby. He doesn't do this, but when it does come to light, Kate seems to be on his side. She doesn't turn on him. There's not that jealousy, that hurt envy of something. I mean, she forgives him if he did do anything wrong and believes him when he says he didn't do anything wrong. And so I like that in her character. Seems like a decent character, although she's not in this book all that much. So that's pretty much covers what I like. Oh, I guess I will add a little bit, some of the little touches of historical fiction in this, because this does take place, like I said, in like the early 1800s. There's some things about this that is interesting. So one of which is all the street food. I mean, Charles Dickens does not ever, I think ever in the entire book, cook himself a meal. He's constantly getting food elsewhere. Sometimes he gets it at his friend's house, but often it's some sort of street vendor. Some peasant girl with a pot of stew over a fire just in the middle of the street on the sidewalk, and he just goes and grabs a cup of soup. Or he will grab a bag of oysters from some other poor person hawking it on the street. So I think that it was really interesting to see that. There's also some stuff going on with like lighting. Obviously everything is lit by candles, and that has some things to play in this. With the candle going out at dark, nobody can see because there's no other way of having light, and that plays into some scenes. So things like that, some of the historical details are interesting. It's not a big deal in this. The author is not big on description, especially not, delving into the historical situation in a lot of areas, but there were hints of interesting things from that. So things I didn't like. So I felt the beginning was too fast-paced and not good in description. And partially I'm going to say that's because this is book 3. Some of the characters have already been pre-introduced and the author doesn't want to go to the trouble of introducing them again. But that's not really encompassing the whole problem. For example, he's given a baby, and it's about 15 pages between the beginning of the book and when he pawns the baby off on somebody else to take care of the baby. And he goes through a little bit of the motions of, okay, well, I have a baby, this baby's 4 months old, this is too early to, have solid food, so obviously I need to get milk for the baby. And so it's like, boom, 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 he gets the baby and he finds somebody to feed the baby, and then he takes the baby and he pawns the baby. And it's so quickly, you don't get any kind of emotional resonance with the character on how much difficulty this would actually cause. You don't feel for the character. It happens just too quickly. And some of the introduction to other characters can just be, the author gives you a list at the very beginning of the book of this is the name of the character and this is their relationship to Charles Dickens. Fiance's family, his brother, his friend, his whatever. And because it does it that way, I kind of felt like the author was shortcutting. Like, they'll introduce a character and very, very briefly they're there and then gone, and then come back, and they don't kind of reintroduce, remind you who this character is. There were times that I actually flipped to that front page and go, who is this character again? And that could be, again, because it's a third book, but it felt more like the author just didn't want to spend the time doing that. Like, they're not focused on character development and relationships and the introspection that would come across as you thinking about your relationship with this other character. Instead, it's all very much about events. So it felt like a shallow book because of that, because you didn't really feel in-depth relationship with our main character. It felt very superficial in that respect. All right. So another thing I didn't like, the murder is not solvable for the reader. In fact, it's not actually solvable for our main character. It is a murder and they investigate it, but they don't actually solve things. Instead, they're just like curious and poke at things and go, what can I figure out about this? And maybe there's a red herring there. Maybe they'll find something else, about somebody else's issue. But the main murder mystery, they don't actually solve in any way. It's somebody comes to them and says, here's some information you had no way of knowing about their past. And then the character's like, okay, well, then obviously he's a good suspect for the murder. And then a little bit later, they go, well, that person probably did the murder, but we have no way of knowing it. We have no evidence. And then that suspect shows up doing something wrong, caught red-handed doing something, and as they basically tackle him and call for the police, the guy just spills his confession. And that is basically the solving of the murder. So there is no solving of the murder. It just is it's ridiculous how little that Charles Dickens actually had, even though he's the sleuth, that he actually solved anything, which was nothing. So I'm not impressed with the murder. It's a cozy mystery, and cozy mysteries are supposed to be a lot more lighthearted than something like Agatha Christie. But this one there was no sleuthing going on, really. It just felt blah. It was anticlimactic at the end because of the lack of murder solving. Okay, so the ghostly situations are another thing that I didn't love about this. It felt kind of wedged in because it is based on A Christmas Carol, and the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future are so heavily present in that novel that the author felt she needed to wedge in that concept in here. So you have somebody pretending to be a ghost, and you're just like, in real life, would somebody pretending to be a ghost be all that scary? Probably not. And the way the characters react to that is kind of up in the air, whether they were actually scared or, was it really a ghost and was it not? A window is broken. And so that's part of the mystery. Did the ghost break the window? We can't find any rock that was thrown in, and the glass burst into the room. So it must have been a ghostly apparition. And you find out later, not surprisingly, that somebody basically threw a rock. But it's kind of weird that, it's probably a ghost because we can't find the rock. And then later on somebody confesses to have thrown a rock. And you kind of, it just didn't feel very well thought out on the author's part. Like, I will make this scary by making unknown reason that the window burst. And we can't solve it because there is no rock. And then just later just saying, there was a rock, you just didn't find it. So I don't think that's good writing. My overall feeling was this is just okay. I wouldn't have any urge to read the rest of the series. I don't highly recommend it. It wasn't horrible. And somebody who's a huge fan of Charles Dickens, I would probably say, sure, read it for something different. Or if you're a huge fan of A Christmas Carol, if you're a huge fan of cozy murder mysteries, maybe. But I wasn't impressed with the murder mystery itself enough to recommend it even for people who like just cozy mysteries. It just felt bland. like I said, kind of shallow and superficial for most of it. I didn't love it enough to really recommend it. So on to part 2. I have to go grab the book, just a moment. So my next book is going to be All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. Now, I'm not sure whether this is historical fiction or whether it's actually non-fiction, whether it's an account of his real experiences or whether they're fictional stories based on his life. But this was written in the 70s about a veterinarian in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s, and his experiences as a vet. So there are all sorts of little short stories of things that he encountered. Without having read it, I can't tell you much more than that. But it's a classic in the sense that it's been beloved for 50 years. Not classic as in public domain. It's not quite that old yet. Although my copy is so old that it would feel like it. It's in poor shape. But anyway, I've never read it before, so I'm going to attempt it next. I hope you join me. Thank you for watching.